Now we will have another keynote presentation by Dr. Maryam Wasif Khan, Associate Professor, Mushtaq Ahmad, Gurmani School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Lahore University of Management Sciences. I'm requesting Dr. Wasif Khan to come to stage and present a keynote presentation on Who is a Muslim? Literary constructions on Muslim identity in colonial and post-colonial South Asia.
Assalamu alaikum everybody, and thank you so much for inviting me to Dhaka, especially to the Daira group who thought of me. So what I'd like to actually share today in this very short session, so I might not complete it, is a little essay that I wrote a while ago, several years ago in fact, on the feminist poet Femida Riaz's short memoir. It's between a memoir and a novella, and it's about her trip to Dhaka in 1981. So back in 1981, she was a kind of an inadvertent Pakistani coming to the new Bangladesh, which was 10 years old then. And the memoir is titled Zinda Bahar, which is the name of a street in Dhaka, and it's a street that she searches for during her time in the city, and the novella is part of a trilogy that is titled Hum Log. And of course, Hum Log, I want to spend a second or two talking about that. So Hum Log translates variously, so it could mean us, it could mean us people, or it could mean people like us. The title is fluid, encompassing, and generous in its possibilities, yet possessed with the capacity to limit. Even as Hum Log could mean us or us people, in a twist and a turn, it could become insular and imply people like us. Femida Riaz is one of Urdu's and Pakistan's most outspoken, deeply expressive female poets. She needs little introduction, but I can show a quick photo of her here to those of you who don't know her. And she, of course, she's mainly known for her feminist poetry, for her work, which was her work Badan Darida, which was her most famous volume. And her novellas are little known, but they're actually an important modality for us to think about ourselves as South Asian citizens and co-citizens. So Riaz was actually, Femida Riaz was born in 1946 in Meerut, and she ended up spending most of her childhood in Hyderabad, Sindh, and that became Pakistan, and she inadvertently became a Pakistani. Her first marriage failed, but it took her to London, where she worked as a broadcaster for BBC Urdu. She returned to Karachi, remarried Zafar Ali Ujjan, a Sindhi leftist worker, and her haunting collection of poems around the female body, Badan Darida, was published in 1974, but disparaged by many as obscene and shameless. During this time, the couple also started publishing a leftist journal, Awaz, but Ziaul Haq, the Islamist military dictator, began his decade of rule in 1978, and Ujjan was soon imprisoned on charges of sedition. Femida Riaz was forced to flee to Delhi, taking up a position of poet in residence at Jamia Millia University. And after a decade in exile, Riaz returned to Pakistan, where despite a change in government, she was considered suspect, and she always reveals that she was called a bloody Indian bitch on these anonymous threatening phone calls that she used to receive back in the 80s and the 90s. Zinda Bahar is this very short novella, as I mentioned. It's the name of a street in Old Dhaka that literally translates to a living spring, perhaps more so. But perhaps more so in other novels, Riaz lays bare the experience of exile and the fecund renditions of both history and geography that the minority position can produce. The title itself, Zinda Bahar, is an uncertain construction, for what the reader takes as Bahar or spring can, through the addition of a single diacritic, which is the Zair in the Nastaliq script, it can be read as Zinda Bihar, or living Bihar, which is of course one allusion to the minority population of Bihari Muslims who after the creation of the new nation state in 1971 were permanently exiled to live in refugee camps in Dhaka, not Bangladeshi, no longer Pakistani. Emerging out of Riaz's travels to Dhaka in December 1989, Zinda Bahar is a narrative whose title slips between the age-old joys of spring and the modern trauma of statelessness. Spilling across the boundaries of literary forms, it disrupts established accounts of national history, destabilizing through its slowly learned doubt the notion that the ethical subject can ever truly be at home in a post-colonial nation state such as Pakistan, Bangladesh, or India. In other words, our very citizenship in many ways is something that Fahmida Riaz calls to question in this work. The notion of being at home is something that she calls into question in her work. Fahmida Riaz begins her journey to Dhaka by marking her shock at the human whirlpool that greets her at the immigration area. I shockingly did not see a human whirlpool. I saw the opposite when I landed. Her own bewilderment at having lost her travel documents, the incredible wave of loneliness that overtakes her as she listens to the hum of Bangla, a language she cannot speak or understand. Reacting instinctively, she wonders whether to turn to the ground staff of Pakistan's national airline, which carried her to Dhaka, for they were Pakistani, they spoke Urdu, and thus would not kill her. This is how she imagines herself as she is stranded at Dhaka airport. Ultimately, she rejects the national and turns to the only community she knows to be true, that is the community of other women. And in doing so, she finds her initial consternation giving way to joy and relief. All of this is expressed variously, the narrator clarifying to readers that she will refer to her subjects by name. So Fahmida Riaz calls herself Fahmida Riaz. At times she calls herself Woh, an indistinct woman walking around, and at other times Main, the I itself. Her three feminine personas reveal the crisis of the post-colonial subject, who is ravaged at once by the calls of the nation, a humanist impulse, fear of disbelonging, and the charms of nostalgia. The confrontation between I, Fahmida Riaz, and her, Main, Fahmida or Wo, is at its core a destabilizing exercise that wrests authority from any single voice through the critical and interrogative presence of other voices, other selves. The beginning of the novella then is rife with markers that carry through the narrative. The uncertainty of the ethical subject in the subcontinent that is now defined by the certainties of its boundaries, national, religious, and ethnic. Many of the categories of national, even populist, though, that this book has, I can show you another picture actually right here of Fahmida Riaz. Many of the categories of the national, even populist, that surface in Fahmida Riaz's story are always expose the dangers and imminence of power. Zinda Bahar exemplifies the placelessness of exile, whether it is that of Fahmida Riaz herself as she travels through Dhaka and South Asia as a secular citizen, or of the Bihari population of Dhaka. But it also exposes the deep attachments of these categories to all that is deployed against them. Thus, notions of Muslimness, religio-nationalist affiliations with Urdu, forms of storytelling, belief in the state and the battle of its creation, and even itinerancy are told to us through the historical experience of minority. Riaz, both in terms of biography and in her writing, appears as a feminine Eric Auerbach for our place and time, creating from her loss and displacement an ethical imperative of how to live as a critical and secular citizen in modern South Asia. So Riaz and her two personas that accompany her arrive in Dhaka a day before or so the 18th anniversary of Bangladesh's independence from Pakistan, an event that was preceded by a bloody genocide of a number of intellectuals, journalists, artists, and political workers by the West Pakistani armed forces and satellite groups within Dhaka. Al-Shams and Al-Badr are the best known among them. Her hosts, the organizers of a literary conference on South Asian writers, are professors at Dhaka University, eager to tell the story of their young country and to show her around a city that is at once novel and familiar. Bearing uncertain memories from a school trip that never took place, as well as the curiosity to find Zinda Bahar Lane, and later it's revealed to us that Zinda Bahar Lane was the home of the Urdu poet Afzal Ahmad Sayyed, who was here in 71 and of course had to flee in very difficult circumstances. So as the anniversary of the West Pakistani surrender of Dhaka approaches, Riaz attempts to comprehend the atmosphere around her, watching television commemorations of the liberation war with her hosts, reliving a history of events that she only knows from a distance, and listening to testimonies of the families of massacred intellectuals. And as she enters, and this is of course the reason I wanted to share this piece is precisely because of the dissonance, and in many ways for myself as a coming here is really a momentous occasion. Femida says to herself, my mind was not ready to suddenly come face to face with 1971. And then suddenly, where had I landed up? The moment progresses and the narrator returns, watching herself now as a character who attempts to ask dispassionate questions of her hosts, but cannot stop the tears from falling in her mind. And that is, of course, when she realizes what it is that she is encountering. At night, she is haunted by these ghost-like figures, one of whom forces her to say Joy Bangla, the other of whom is stony and silent, and to ask her whether she wants to be considered an exile again. So she has these, in many, I think in the way of the two Islamic farishtas that sit on our shoulders, she has one of each, and she speaks about each one of them antagonizing her. And so, of course, one says you must be one with the new state, and says Joy Bangla. The other reminds her, you know, to really rein in her desire to be one with the Bangladeshis. It asks her, did she wish to suffer threatening phone calls and slurs of treason, or would she prefer to just be a citizen, a Pakistani citizen who is loyal and accepted by the state? But Riaz resists the laws of nationalism and the stability of a single identity, and she uses this moment in Dhaka to revisit her own past as a Pakistani or a West Pakistani subject in order to understand Bangladesh as a site of belonging, both in terms of the state narrative, but also as a site of unbounded human agency expressed through hospitality, generosity, empathy, language, and humor. Islam and its histories are practices in the region are regular references, whether at an early moment when Riaz almost bursts into laughter at hearing the azan in Bangla accented Arabic for the first time, or in more somber discussions during which she is conscious of the irony of the situation and finds herself in fact arguing in favor of Islam as a bond between the Bengalis and the Biharis, who of course in this moment are an alien category. As Femida Riaz, the visitor from Karachi, traverses the city encountering historic sites such as the Ramna race course, she recalls her own thoughts and conversations during the 1971 war, an event she experienced from London. In one phone call, she remembers that a Pakistani friend shouts to her on the phone, "Dhaka will not be taken, we will make Dhaka into our final fort, our Akhri Chatan." His last phrase, of course, is a reference to Naseem Hijazi's eponymous novel, which is these historic nationalist works in Urdu. And Dhaka, again, is seen by the West Pakistanis as their last fortress that they are not going to relinquish. She recalls herself at the time a woman of no more than 26 years old, just a year older than Pakistan, a country that hadn't even turned 25. She wonders but does not ask out loud, where was it that all the university professors were lined up and shot by the Pakistan army? And then a frequent phrase of the time crosses into her mind, "Ye sab bhenchod Hindu hain." And that's really the West Pakistani narrative that is given at the time to justify the killing of Bengali intellectuals in 1971. So I'll just go a little bit over. So and throughout the kind of the memoir, Femida passes through Dhaka and of course ends up in a Bihari camp as well for a little time. I'll just say this. So Fahmida Riaz's strange and growing attachment to Dhaka and its citizens appears at times as the involuntary and naive sentiment of an exile eager to belong in a place that will have him or her. Yet she finds herself at the camps within which Dhaka's Bihari population are mostly confined. The living spring or Zinda Bahar of discovery and affinity soon morphs into its darker other, Zinda Bihar or living Bihar. The presence of Biharis in Dhaka goes back to the partition of 1947, when 2 million, at least almost 2 million Muslims from West Bengal and Bihar migrated to East Pakistan. Urdu speaking, the Bihari migrants, though relocated to the Bangla speaking East Pakistan, continue to imagine and affiliate themselves politically and culturally with the West Pakistani national narrative. Of course, in 2008, I believe the Bangladesh government has started awarding citizenship. So Fahmida never really saw this moment and never really saw the rehabilitation of the Biharis. And I think now Bangladesh has a new problem, a new refugee problem, which is the Rohingyas. And it really, it's a strange cycle. So she spends some time, of course, Riaz spends some time in her memoir on the Bihari camps. But at the same time, she also sees within the camp the kinds of hyper-nationalisms that have emerged, and she really kind of comes out of the camps quite desolate, because it's in the camps that she sees the face of Ziaul Haq. A portrait of Ziaul Haq is adorned in the Bihari camps, and she finds her worst nemesis even as she travels outside of Pakistan. Okay. So naively romantic on the one hand, but at the same time an essential offering to the present and future of this and other places, Riaz's illogical and yet instinctive confrontation with the immediate and distant past is a gesture of reconciliation and above all hope. Old Dhaka, Zinda Bahar Lane, the Buri Ganga River, once an extension of the Ganges, appear to her as if outside of the nation state and national histories. In this part of the city, which is otherwise marked with signs of political struggle or violent nationalism, Riaz finds other imaginaries. Centuries ago, she recalls Urdu was one of the many languages that thrived in this area during the 15th century Hussain Shahi dynasty, a period known for its linguistic diversity and fluid forms of faith and practice. But in the present, the monopoly of Urdu has become the foremost sign of the Bengali struggle. She wonders where this past had been banished to. Perhaps one day she thinks the haze will clear on its own. Bangla was the language of Bengal, but Urdu too, she remembers, once had a place here. In the realms of empirical knowledge and chronological histories, Riaz's hopeful meanderings may appear as irrational and fanciful. Likewise, her narrative as a whole, uncertain in form, shifting from character to consciousness, profoundly attached to the Indian subcontinent, offers no grand conclusions, no reformative counsel or political solutions, and no conclusive end. Riaz leaves Dhaka desirous as ever of making a home in the city, her mind invaded by the image of a young child on a roof in Zinda Bahar Lane, summoning her by waving a flag of Bangladesh. But she thinks of her own children, the difficulties of a different language, and then finally of her own incessant wanderings, her exile and her life in Karachi. She looks at her watch. She had forgotten to change the time zone upon arriving at Dhaka, and is reminded as she boards her return flight that the old time or the time that she had come from was still ongoing. The disruption of her subliminal yearning to find a home by her watch, an object marking linear time and bounded space, forces Riaz into the precarity of her present. To acknowledge and to persist within this precarity, Riaz suggests in this work and in her other two novellas, one of them is called Godavari and the other is called Karachi, that in itself, to acknowledge and persist in this task is really the task of the secular subject. Alone, except for her small community of fellow women poets and political activists, Riaz tirelessly grapples with the looming specters of nationalism and the violence it breeds. Her concerns are never national or bordered, evident from Godavari, in which a young mother becomes a witness to state-sponsored violence against Adivasis in Maharashtra, or in her poem, Tum bilkul hum jaise nikle, you have turned out just like us, which decries the rise of the Hindu right in India. Although this very short foray hardly does Fahmida Riaz and her profound opus justice, it does permit an explication of the forms of a possibly secular literary practice that national literatures in Urdu, Bangla, Hindi may take. Riaz's notions of history are non-linear and her linguistic sensibilities are unbounded and non-religious. And her possible attachments to place and people are tempered by her femininity, which in turn is expressed outside of conventional form, language, and narrative structures. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, guys.